Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Law, Buildings, and Code Committee. Tonight, I'm joined by committee members Megan Keegan and Richard Conti. We're also joined by Councilmember Sonia Frederick. And because I cannot see all of the people there, if you guys don't mind just introducing yourself. Oh, Robert Wenner and Carly, and joining us from staff. And that's it. Got it. So this evening we'll be talking about Ordinance 217124 by Councilmember Frederick, Ordinance 55225 by Councilmember Conti, and Ordinance 209125 by Councilmember Conti. We'll start with Ordinance 217124. Councilmember Frederick, would you like to say a few words about it?
Yes, so this ordinance is on behalf of myself and Councilmember Flynn. The spirit of this ordinance is to amend certain sections of the Code of the City of Albany, or a certain section of the Code of the City of Albany to better clarify the instance of tow trucks on streets. And so for context, Councilmember Flynn and I both share an area where we have a lot of instances of tow trucks parking idle on residential streets, and that has become a large problem, continue to be a large problem for the neighborhood in terms of potentially parking tow trucks for multiple days without any recourse, and also impacting the neighbors, reducing parking options for neighbors, and just really impacting the climate of the neighborhood with that tow truck present. And so what this does is it defines that the permissible use of a tow truck on any street would be with a vehicle in tow. So obviously there are reasons for tow trucks to park with a vehicle in tow. And in the instances of idle tow trucks, if they do not have a vehicle in tow between the hours of 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. Or without a vehicle in tow for more than 1 hour between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. This would not be, let me just clarify here. Park a tow truck is defined on any street. Okay, so they can park, sorry, let me clarify. They can park without a vehicle in tow between the hours of 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. or without a vehicle in tow for more than 1 hour between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. So it tries to further clarify and add some restrictions to tow trucks in the spirit of trying to reduce the amount of times tow trucks will park on residential streets with no tow in sight, essentially.
And it appears with the regulations that it seemed to kind of cover, because I know sometimes we have events where a tow truck might need to come later. If they're clear, for example, the Madison Street Fair, if there are people there, they did clear it within that time period. But there could be potentially an event that they needed to clear, and it seems like they wouldn't need an hour, more than an hour to park, should they be in that. So
right. And this is after speaking to both APD and codes about, we had these issues on many streets. We have these issues on many streets, and in terms of like, they can't do much. So we're trying to further clarify the section of the code to make sure that they have power to essentially address when these issues arise.
Any questions? None. Okay. Thank you.
I move to move ordinance 217124 out of committee with a positive recommendation.
Councilmember Conti, would you like to second? Councilmember Keegan moved with positive recommendation. Councilmember Conti seconded. All in favor? Aye. That is unanimous. Thank you so much. We appreciate you working through this.
Thank you.
Next up, we have ordinance 55225 by Councilmember Conti. This is another vehicle and traffic code. Would you like to?
Sure, thank you. So this ordinance amends that section of the city code which prohibits the operation of commercial vehicles weighing in excess of 10,000 pounds from operating on certain streets. And it would add Madison Avenue between South Main Street and Delaware Avenue to the list. It does allow for deliveries, et cetera, so it's not an absolute prohibition, but the actual traffic is the main issue. And this came about from constituent concerns about the impact and what is concerned about the sense of increasing heavy traffic on that stretch of Madison, which in the memo I indicate that it is a narrower part of Madison Avenue as opposed to the lower and upper portions with buildings which are going back a while. You know, your basic townhouses and row houses, where the traffic is impacting in some ways, the structure of the buildings in terms of cracks and things of that nature. And it also potentially has an impact on underground infrastructure as well. So that's where it comes from. I haven't gotten any opposition on it, and I have circulated it. I have actually 2 emails here that I'll just quickly read for the record. One is from Michael Daly, who is a residential property owner on Madison. I own a residential building on Madison between Swan and Lark, Delaware. The City of Albany General Services completed, after National Grid work, sidewalk, concrete work in front of the building. By the time the finished work settled over the summer months, the flush finish receded up to 2 inches. Victims so far that I have witnessed have been skateboarders and multiple inconveniences for wheelchair-using citizens. Many walkers stumble, but these folks probably won't count in a database because they walk with phones in their faces. There's a whole lot of shaking going on with these trucks. This shaking also undermines the underground water infrastructure, especially old cistern cave-ins, as well as the infrastructure of gas lines. So it is not only the above-ground structures of the buildings impacted. And then another from a homeowner on Madison, who I think misread the agenda and seems to be referring to Sonia's ordinance because she's talking about tow trucks and not mine, but, and who actually initially brought the issue to me. She said, "I'm so glad you heard me, and that means a lot. Weight is very important to ease the damage to my home, which was built in 1850 when one was lucky to even have a horse. That being one thing, I see that you focused on heavy equipment such as a tow truck," and that's why I think she was reading the other one first. Let it be known that dump trucks are around 30,000 pounds, which would be included in this, and 72 passenger school buses are around 14,000 pounds. That being said, I have a huge issue with CDTA city buses speeding past my house, and when they inevitably hit the manhole covers in front of my house, my home vibrates. If the entire issue is weight and speed isn't addressed, the legislation will be for nothing. I very likely will, yeah, she won't be able to be here, et cetera. So this does deal with the issue of the weight and the impacts. I mean, speed is always an issue with speed enforcement. And I know since then we have lowered the speed limit. But aside from, I think she was looking at the wrong one. I mean, as clearly her concern was the heavy-duty vehicles. And I did get some other feedbacks, and I don't know if Brad is a resident of Madison also, and if he wants to, in a personal capacity.
Absolutely, come on up.
Brad Glass, I live at 329 Madison Avenue. I can testify to some of the things that have been described by the other folks that wrote letters. Particularly, I live near the light at Swan in Madison, and there are rather large trucks that go through there at sometimes high speeds, and when they do hit a manhole or a pothole or something like that, the buildings do shake. Things also fly off the buildings. It's a rather densely populated, narrow stretch of Madison Avenue, and I think it would benefit from having less truck traffic through there. Obviously, ambulances, emergency services, all things like that, things I'm used to living in an urban area and not complaining about that, but the trucks seem somewhat unnecessary on this route in a lot of cases and drive rather dangerously. So I'm just here to support the ordinance tonight.
Thank you very much. Any questions? I would just say, as somebody that is very familiar with that stretch, it is completely different than the rest of Madison Avenue.
Yes.
And very easy for there to be a dramatic traffic backup too as a result of trucks
Right,
just
right.
trying to navigate it because
Yeah,
they're so much bigger.
And and people also sense that there's been an increase in the level of traffic that's gone through over the years. So that adds to the issue as well.
Thank you.
I would like to move ordinance 55225 out of committee with a positive recommendation.
I'm going to second it just because it's unorthodox for someone to second their own. But you can if you want.
No, that's fine, that's fine.
All in favor?
Aye.
It passes through unanimously.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for coming, Brad.
Thank you, Brad.
Next, we have ordinance 2091-25 by Councilmember Conti.
Okay. All right, and this might not, it's 2091-25. So this ordinance so in our code regarding parking, this ordinance includes Columbus Day observed as a day where traffic or parking regulations are waived. This would redesignate that day, Columbus Day, to Francis Xavier Cabrini Day. And I don't know if this is ready or not, but here's the issue. There are, several communities around the country have either redesignated Columbus Day as Indigenous Peoples' Day, or have designated it as both Columbus Day and Indigent Peoples' Day, or have maintained it as Columbus Day. And it's one where there's a lot of controversy that in part surrounds the issue of Columbus himself. So in part, you need to go into the history of how we got here in the first place. And it really dealt with the treatment of immigrants, Italian immigrants to this country, really in the 1880s, 1890s, where there was a lot of discrimination. They were treated second class. They were really not welcomed or accepted in many ways, which all culminated in an incident in 1891, in which that was some people remember or know about, which isn't really taught. Was the lynching of 11 Italian immigrants, Sicilian immigrants in New Orleans in 1891, who had actually been acquitted, or the jury was hung or whatever, in relation to the supposed assassination of the New Orleans police chief. And the allegation was that the crime was committed by Italian immigrants, supposedly before he died, in his dying words were, say, the Dagos did it, or something like that. The lynching, some of those, a mob basically took these people out of their jail. Some of them had been shot and were dead, and they still lynched them. It's one of the largest group lynchings in the country. And it was also, there was an international situation which involved the government of Italy at the time. And remember, actually, Italy as a unified country didn't exist until around 1860. And so, in part, to diffuse some of this, in 1892, which was actually the quadricentennial of Columbus's discovery, so-called, of America, President Harrison at the time designated Columbus Day as a way of diffusing the situation, and Columbus became a symbol of Italian-American pride, in a sense, to legitimize Italian immigrants as legitimate immigrants to this country. And it was kind of an accident, but it kind of, over the years, we know more about Columbus, we know more about the history, and I think all this discussion, we lose track of the real issues back in the 1890s and further was really the issue of immigration and how Italian immigrants were treated in a way to redress some of those issues. And I will say that immigration policy in this country back then was also very discriminatory, and Southern European immigrants were less welcomed, you might say, than others from Northern European, et cetera. But predominantly, it was Italians that were moving in, Sicilians from Southern Italy. So what my intent here is to kind of try to identify a figure who is more representative of the Italian immigrant experience, and so we don't lose the history of what Columbus Day was all about, or meant to be about, you might say, and focus on a figure, Frances Cabrini, who was an immigrant herself and who came to this country. She was a nun, Mother Cabrini, and who was very involved in working amongst the immigrant community. And, you know, she helped found hospitals and clinics and orphanages, et cetera. But she was someone who was very much involved and was more of a model of the challenges that the immigrant population was facing and the perseverance, et cetera. I think my memo tries to capture a lot of that. And I think I also tie it back to what we're dealing with today in terms of the issue of people coming to this country, immigrants coming to this country, and it is also a message of welcome, you might say, and shedding a light on the immigration issue today as well by recognizing someone who herself was an immigrant, who worked among immigrants to help them, et cetera. So, you know, that was the intent. The state of Colorado in 2022 did redesignate statewide Columbus Day as Cabrini Day. I think Mother Cabrini had a relationship or involvement in Colorado, and that was probably why they did it out there. But that was, you know, in terms of looking at a better way of recognizing the day that still preserves the history and not the baggage that I think Columbus really brings. I will say that it has not been met with universal, support from some of the more organizations within the Italian American community who kind of are fixated on Columbus. I think one of them is actually having a Defending Columbus forum next week. So, I mean, if you have to spend time defending Columbus, you're really not focusing on the history that we are kind of losing with the way things are right now. So that's why I came up with that day as a redesignation to try to preserve the history and not get it lost with someone who really epitomizes what it was all about. And as I say, there is no consensus, so, you know, I'm just saying that now, but I think it's good to put it out and get it out there and have a real discussion on what it was all about. So.
Councilmember Keegan?
I will just say that, you know, we have another pending bill that talks about, I believe, renaming Columbus Day as Indigenous Peoples Day that's been sitting in committee for a while, and I had significant concerns about that for specifically this reason, right? That Columbus Day was not so much about Christopher Columbus. It was really about Italian-American heritage. And to me, it's almost discriminatory to erase the fact that we recognize Italian-American heritage on this specific day, particularly given the history that they faced in this country. So I think what Councilmember Conti is proposing is a very good compromise on the issue, because it still gets to the heart of why we had Columbus Day in the first place, while also addressing the issues, the very real issues that other members of our community face with regards to the history of Columbus himself. So, you know, I would prefer to do things this way than the other proposed legislation.
Councilmember Frederick.
I appreciate the thought process and all the due diligence that went into this, and I think it's a good way to honor the Italian-American heritage in a different way, and understanding that we might want to rename Columbus Day. I guess my question is, and first and foremost, proud Italian-American here, so I'm just going to disclose that, but because we have two kind of parties looking at this day, would you consider combining your day with Indigenous Peoples Day and having it be kind of comprehensive to both parties officially here in the city?
Yeah, and I think other communities have done that as a way, as I said, Columbus Day, Indigenous Peoples Day, which I think is kind of contradictory considering Columbus's record to do the same, frankly. But I think Cabrini Indigenous Peoples Day is, you know, it works. But that's a way of recognizing both. And we do, I mean, you know, we pass resolutions. Of course, we have a different president today, but prior to that, you know, President Biden did issue resolutions or proclamations recognizing both days. But I think I don't have a problem making it like, you know, Cabrini Indigenous Peoples Day, something along those lines.
I would love to see that too. I think I really loved when you introduced this, because it did, I think Councilmember Keegan was right, that it's something, before this all came up, I didn't know the history of Columbus Day. And I do think that that's an important piece to recognize. But one of the things that we're very aware of now that I think has come up with Indigenous Peoples Day is the poor treatment of Indigenous people throughout our history, and having a day to, I think it does, I would love to see both, especially with someone like Mother Cabrini, who I think would be incredibly proud to share the day with Indigenous people, to recognize that. So, and I think it's also important because it continues the conversation of why the day started in the first place, and the reminder that, especially now, we are a nation of immigrants, and it's not always been, it hasn't been an easy path throughout history. So recognizing that the diversity of that difficult path for many, I think, is important, and it's a good reminder. So I would love that as well. I don't know how you feel about that.
I think my only other concern is, as Richard knows, and I think we kind of chatted about this, is that this is controversial for people in the community. And once we move this out of committee, you know, they're going to rail at a meeting, and there's not really an opportunity to come back and address that through amendments unless we reintroduce legislation. And this, I think you just introduced this the beginning, when did you put this in? End of August?
September, I guess September, the first meeting in September.
Yeah,
If we report this out with amendment, I would not try to move it for full passage until there's an opportunity. Now, that would help get more focus on it and get more attention on it.
I
And
think.
I would
I
want
think
to
my
make sure.
concern with moving it tonight is that we move so quickly
Mhm.
that we haven't had that conversation, that people may not even be aware that we're talking about this evening. Does that make sense? Like, I would have expected people to be in here to comment today.
So I can, without it being moved out of committee, I can move at the next council meeting to amend it. So it now would be Cabrini Day Indigenous Peoples' Day, so that would then be the one that's pending. And then if you want, we can have another meeting on it. Or I can, if you want to report it out or amend, I won't move it until we get more, whichever way you want to do it. But I have no problem making that amendment.
I really think it's up to you, Richard, as the sponsor, what you want to do. I'm just expressing my personal concern, that I know that this is gonna create some agitation for very valued members of the Albany community. And I don't know if it's better to be able to have a conversation that we can have in a committee
Yeah.
meeting, that we can't necessarily have in a regular meeting. And
Okay.
if you
So-
want to wait and
Yeah,
do
no,
another
no,
meeting,
so
or if you
we're
want to
gonna
move
see-
it.
We'll come back. It doesn't have to be done right now.
Yeah, and
I will, but I think I will, at the next full meeting, I can move to amend it.
I
extend
think
it.
that makes sense. I'm also very open, even if especially because the sponsor wouldn't have a problem with it. I think the only time that it would be an issue is if the sponsor was like, absolutely not. But
Mhm.
if it was something that you wanted to move forward, I mean, I guess not for any real reason, because we can always have another committee
Yeah.
meeting. And I will say the finance meetings are much more reasonable this year. Good job. But that would have been my only concern, is that we get into budget season and it gets difficult to find days. But I also be very open to just doing a meeting on this if that's something that was needed, whether or not it had been passed out of committee. So either way, I think we can offer a committee-like structure for, like a smaller space if people wanted to have the opportunity to have a real discussion. So, but why don't we, so Richard, if,
So I'll hold it in committee. I will make the amendment otherwise at the next council meeting on, I guess, next Thursday, I think, or whenever it is. And then it'll still be in committee that way. Okay. And then we'll do some more outreach and, see.
and it's also something, if we want to, if as you're talking to people, either of you that are getting feedback, if it's something that you think it would be helpful to schedule a committee meeting out a bit, specifically on this, so people can plan for it and come and discuss it, I'm very happy to do that too. It's definitely something that, we want to make sure that some things are not just names, they're important conversations. We want to make sure that it has plenty of time for that conversation. So with that, we will hold ordinance 2091-25, and we'll look forward to Councilmember Conti amending it at the next committee meeting, and we'll TBD take it up, but sooner rather than later. And with that, can I get a motion? By Councilmember Keegan, second by myself, all in favor, all of us. Have a wonderful night. Thank you so much.